The most dangerous prison in the world has no walls, no guards, no locks. It is built entirely from other people's opinions. And you built it yourself, brick by brick. Every time you changed your answer to match the room. Every time you swallowed what you really thought. Every time you performed a version of yourself that would be accepted rather than showing the version that is real. You built the prison, and today you're going to find the door. If this is your first time here, welcome to Wisdom Forgotten. Subscribe. We take ancient Eastern wisdom and modern psychology and turn them into tools you can actually use. Now, let's get into it. Let's start with something that will immediately remove the shame from this conversation. Approval seeking is not weakness. It is not vanity. It is not immaturity. It is one of the oldest and most sophisticated survival mechanisms the human brain ever developed. For 99% of human history, social rejection was not uncomfortable. It was fatal. To be cast out from the tribe meant no shelter, no food, no protection, no survival. The brain that learned to monitor social approval obsessively was the brain that stayed alive. Your approval-seeking nervous system is not broken. It is ancient. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do. The problem is that it evolved for a world that no longer exists, and it hasn't updated its software in 10,000 years. Neuroscientists have confirmed this with imaging studies. Social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Literally the same regions of the brain light up when you are disapproved of as when you are physically hurt. Which means when you post something and receive silence, when you speak and the room doesn't respond, when someone you respect dismisses you, your brain is not being dramatic. It is experiencing something it genuinely registers as injury. Understanding this changes everything, because you cannot shame yourself out of a survival response. You can only understand it deeply enough to choose differently. So where does chronic approval seeking come from? Not from being weak, from being young, from being a child in an environment where love felt conditional, where approval could be withdrawn, where being too loud, too different, too honest, too much yourself had consequences you couldn't afford. And so you learned, the way children learn everything, through repetition and consequence. You learned to edit yourself before speaking, to scan the room before entering, to feel out what was wanted and become that, to make yourself acceptable, to make yourself safe. And here is the tragedy of it. You were so good at it. You became so skilled at reading rooms and adjusting accordingly that over time, something quietly happened. You lost the thread back to yourself. Not all at once, gradually, imperceptibly, one edited opinion at a time, one truth swallowed at a time, one performance of acceptability at a time, until one day you realized you couldn't answer a simple question. What do I actually want, without first running it through the filter of what others would think of the answer? The Japanese have a concept for what was lost in that process. They call it Jibun. It translates roughly as self. But in Japanese philosophy, Jibun is not the self you perform for others. It is not the self you constructed from other people's expectations. Jibun is the self that exists independent of observation, the self that is true whether or not anyone is watching, whether or not anyone approves, the self that was there before the editing began. And finding your way back to Jibun, that is the entire work. But before we get to the solution, we need to understand one more layer of the problem. Because approval seeking doesn't just steal your authenticity, it steals your direction. Here's what happens psychologically when you outsource your self-worth to other people's opinions. You become a compass that points toward whoever is in the room, rather than toward true north. In one conversation, you believe one thing about yourself. In another conversation, you believe something completely different. Your confidence, your sense of value, your understanding of who you are, all of it fluctuates based on external input.
And you can never feel settled. You can never feel certain, because you're building your identity on ground that shifts with every person's mood, every room's energy, every comment's tone. It is genuinely impossible to build a stable life on an unstable foundation. Psychologists call this external locus of control, the belief, usually unconscious, that your worth is determined by forces outside yourself. The research on external locus of control is unambiguous. People who operate from it experience significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and helplessness, not because life is harder for them, because they have given the controls of their inner world to people who don't know they're flying the plane. Now let's talk about what Jibun actually requires, because this is not simply a matter of caring less what people think. That advice, just stop caring what people think, is not advice. It is a destination described without a map. Caring less is the result of the work, not the work itself. The work is something much more specific, and the Japanese gave it a name. The concept is Dokuritu, independence, but not the independence of isolation or arrogance. Dokuritu in Japanese philosophy means standing on your own ground, having a center that belongs only to you, an inner reference point that does not move when the room moves, a place inside yourself that you return to, not because you don't care about others, but because you know who you are independent of whether others confirm it. Dokuritu is built through 3 specific practices, and these are not philosophical abstractions. These are concrete, daily, repeatable actions that accumulate over time into something the approval-seeking nervous system has never had, a self it can trust. The first practice is opinion before exposure. Before you enter any situation where approval will be sought, a conversation, a meeting, a social event, a post, form your own opinion first. Write it down if necessary. What do you actually think about this? What do you actually feel? What would you say if no one's response mattered? This sounds simple. For the chronic approval seeker, it is one of the most difficult things they will ever do, because they have spent so long forming opinions after observing the room that forming one before feels almost impossible, like a muscle that has never been used. The practice is to use it daily before every significant interaction. What do I think? What do I feel? What is true for me here? That question, asked and answered honestly before exposure to others, begins to rebuild the internal compass.
The second practice comes from the Zen concept of Hitori, solitude, not loneliness, solitude. Time spent alone not as escape but as return to yourself. The approval seeker is often terrified of solitude because in the absence of other people's reactions, there's nothing to tell them who they are. The silence is unbearable, and that unbearability is the exact diagnosis. It reveals how completely self-knowledge has been outsourced. The practice of Hitori, intentional, regular, reflective solitude, is the practice of learning to be with yourself, of discovering that you exist and have value in the absence of observation, that your worth is not dependent on being witnessed. This is one of the most healing things a chronic approval seeker can do, and one of the most resisted. The third practice is what modern psychology calls values clarification, and what Japanese philosophy embeds in the concept of Jibun. You must know what you stand for, independent of what others stand for, not what you were taught to value, not what your culture values, not what earns you the most approval in the rooms you frequent, what you actually value, what matters to you when no one is watching, what you would choose if choice had no social consequence. Clarifying your values is not a one-time exercise. It is an ongoing practice of honest self-examination. And every time you make a decision from your values rather than from the room's expected response, every single time you lay one more brick of Dokuritu, one more wall of a different kind of structure, not a prison built from other people's opinions, a home built from your own truth.
Here is what I want you to understand about the Japanese concept of Jibun and why it is the antidote to everything we've been discussing. Jibun does not mean not caring about others. It does not mean arrogance. It does not mean disconnection. In Japanese culture, one of the most communal, relationship-oriented cultures on Earth, Jibun is understood as the prerequisite for genuine connection. You cannot truly give yourself to others if there is no self to give. You cannot genuinely love if you have dissolved yourself entirely into the other's expectations. You cannot contribute authentically if everything you contribute has been pre-filtered through what will be received well. Jibun, a stable, honest, grounded self, is not the enemy of relationship. It is the foundation of it. The people who love you most do not want the performance. They want you, and you cannot give them what you have not first found. So, here is what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, today. Ask yourself honestly, in what areas of my life am I living from other people's approval rather than my own values? Your career, your relationships, the way you dress, speak, present yourself, the opinions you share and the ones you keep silent, the dreams you pursue and the ones you hide. Find one area, just one, and make one small decision in that area today from your own center, from your Jibun, not from the room, not from the expected response, from what is true for you. It will feel uncomfortable. It may feel terrifying. That discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing something new. It is the feeling of a muscle being used for the first time, of a compass being recalibrated, of a self being reclaimed. The prison has no walls, which means the door has always been open. You just needed to know where to look. Subscribe to Wisdom Forgotten. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And in what area of your life have you been seeking approval instead of living from your own truth? I read every single one. See you in the next video.